Welcome to the second of a series of 4 videos on doing a systematic review. In this video, we'll be looking at the first 4 steps in the process: creating a protocol, choosing where to search, devising your search strategy, and running your search and recording the results. The first step is to create a protocol for your review, and it is very important that you discuss this with your supervisor as it is developed. As part of doing the protocol, you will need to devise a clear and focused question for your study and also outline the methodology. This includes information about the background, the research question and the aims for your study, drawing up criteria for inclusion and exclusion to help you judge the relevance of the studies you find from your search. And you will often use a framework such as PICO for this. So PICO is population, intervention, control or comparator, and outcome. And it's a framework you can use to help you come up with those criteria for inclusion and exclusion. Your protocol will also include details and methods such as your search strategy, where you're going to search and what keywords you're going to use, how you're going to select studies for inclusion and assess the quality of those studies. It will then include some information about how you're going to extract and analyse the data, and whether you're going to do just a narrative synthesis of the results or a meta-analysis. And you can find a template for creating a protocol on our systematic review guide. And don't forget to have a look at the Prospero database and the Cochrane database to find examples of a protocol on Prospero and full systematic reviews on the Cochrane library. The next step is to choose where you're going to search. We recommend looking at the Key Resources page in your library subject guide, where you will find listed the most important databases for your subject. Not only will there be the key databases listed there, but there may be extra ones listed further down the page, which may well be even more relevant for your subject. If you're not sure whether a database is useful for you, try doing something called a scoping search. And that means just searching with your basic keywords to see whether very much comes up. If you don't find much, then you can move on and ignore that database. So try and compile a list of all the relevant databases you think you should include to make sure your search is comprehensive. You will need to spend a bit of time devising your search strategy. And this means thinking about the keywords and phrases that you're going to use when you're searching. So you will have a basic idea of which keywords you need, but as you read around the topic, looking at the papers that your scoping searches have found, look at the abstract, look at the keywords that the authors have assigned to that paper, and just get extra ideas for alternatives you might want to build into your search to make sure it's as comprehensive as possible. And it's a good idea to plan this out in a table, and then you can discuss it with your supervisor, as they are the subject experts, so they may well come up with suggestions that you hadn't thought of. So create a comprehensive list of alternatives that you might want to include in your search. This is an example of how you could use a table to help you plan your search. The example topic that I have here is the effect of blueberries on cognition and mood. Initially, I have picked out the 2 key concepts from this topic, which are blueberries and then cognition. And mood is an alternative to cognition in this context, so I don't mind whether I find articles on cognition or mood, as long as they're combined with blueberries. So then we think about each of those keywords and possible alternatives we might want to include, and they can be listed in another column. So it may be simple things like singular and plural forms of words, blueberries and blueberry. And I've also got the botanical name here for blueberries. And then, as well as having mood as an alternative for cognition, I've included cognitive, memory, brain as an even broader term. So try and create a table where you list out your possible keywords and the alternatives or synonyms that you might want to include in your search. Once you've finalised your search words, you then need to think about how you're going to put them together as a search strategy. And there are a number of techniques you'll need to know about to be able to do this successfully. These include things such as search operators, so using and or to combine your words in the right way, So and is used between your concepts. So every word you include with and, the fewer the number of results you will find. And where you've got those alternatives and synonyms, you use the operator or in between them because you don't mind which of those you're going to find. So if you remember or means more, that will help you remember the distinction between those two search operators. Other techniques you can use to help include sort of alternative words in your search are something called truncation and wildcards. So truncation can be used on the end of a word, so you replace any number of letters with a symbol, usually an asterisk, to pick up different word endings, as in the cognition example you can see. There's also something called wildcards, which can be used to include different spellings, so words like colour or flavour, which have English and American spelling differences, or where you've got an S or a Z in different word spellings for English and American, you can use a wildcard to stand in for that letter. But those vary quite a lot between databases, so you may need to look at the help to decide which one of those you need to use. Something else to consider is, especially if your results are not looking particularly relevant, is where you've got any phrases, can you specify that? So one common way of doing this on most databases is to enclose the phrase in double quotation marks, as in my botanical name for blueberries here. Or you can use something called a proximity operator to have a looser sort of connection between those words. So in this example, I would find cardiovascular within 3 words of disease. Another thing to consider is, does your database have something called a controlled vocabulary? So are the articles included in that database given specific subject terms to describe them? So one example here is the medical subject headings on PubMed. And if you really want to take control of your search, you can actually specify those particular terms in your search, as well as doing keyword searches. So those are all techniques you can use when actually doing your search. Other things to think about are whether there are any limits you want to apply. So after you've run your search, is there a specific date range you want to apply? Are you going to restrict it to a specific study type if your database allows you to do that? And these are all things to talk about with your supervisor. But if you need help with any of these techniques or putting your literature search together, then have a look at the literature searching videos on the Key Resources tab in your subject guide, or contact your liaison librarian and they'll be happy to help. Once you've got your keywords and you've decided how you're going to combine them, you then need to work out how to enter that search into a database, and there are a couple of methods. The first one is to enter all your search words in one go, and there are actually 2 ways of doing this. So some databases, such as the Web of Science, which is the image shown on the screen here, allow you to add a row to your search so that you can have a separate box for each of your concepts. So you don't need to worry about the AND operator. That is automatically put in between those rows. So all you need to do is type in your alternatives on separate rows with the search operator or in between them, and make use of truncation or phrase searching if that's appropriate. The other way of entering your search words all in one go is to put it in a search statement. And that means including all of your words and your search operators in one sentence. But the key thing to note here is that you must include your sets of alternative words in brackets, in round brackets, to group them together. If you don't put those brackets in, your search will not be processed properly. So make sure if you're going to type it in all in one go that you have those brackets in, as well as obviously your search operators and your truncation or wildcards if you're using them. The other way to enter a search is to search for each word or phrase individually and then combine them once you've run those individual searches. And this is the method that you will see if you look at the write-ups in the Cochrane Library and look at the details of the searches. One benefit of doing it this way is that you can see which of your search words are bringing back the most results and may help you decide that maybe you've broadened it too much by using a certain word or phrase, and you may want to eliminate that. So how this works is you enter individual words separately. So search number 1 at the bottom of the image on the left is just for blueberries truncated. My second search is then for the botanical name. Search number 3 then combines those two groups with OR to find either blueberries or Vaccinium corymbosum. I then move on to my next concept, so the cognition group of words, and I run a search for each of those individually, so cognition, truncated, mood, memory and brain. And then search number 8 is bringing those all together into one big set of references. And then my final search, number 9, brings those two together, so results set number 3, my blueberries group, with results set number 8, the cognition group, and finds me articles that contain both of those concepts. Whichever method you choose, whether you do it individually in this way or whether you use the method shown on the previous slide to do the search all in one go, you should find you get exactly the same number of results, whichever of those methods you use. So it's really up to you, but also discuss it with your supervisor whether they want to see this sort of more professional approach to the search. The main bulk of the studies that you will be including in your systematic review will come from searching on databases, but you may wish to supplement that with finding other relevant studies. And you can do this through searching on Google Scholar, on Summon and Google. So these databases are not appropriate for using as the main part of your study because you can't download all of the results from them. But you can use those to supplement the other databases you're using. You can also look at the references in the key papers you find, so you can scan through their references and that might direct you to other studies that your search has not picked up. You can also look at the Times Cited and the Cited References feature in the Web of Science, which can help you jump to other related papers. So Times Cited will be the number of times that paper has been cited since it was published, and the cited references are the papers that it actually used, that the authors used to write that paper. So you're jumping forwards and backwards in time using those citation counts. And some databases will have a related papers list next to each article, so that might help you identify other studies. But ideally, your main search that you're running on databases and the keywords you've chosen will find most of the relevant studies that you will need to include. But anything you do find via these other means needs to be reported separately on the right-hand column of the Prisma diagram. As you do your searches, you should keep a record of what you've done, and this can be especially useful when you're in the planning stages for your searches, so that you know what you've done previously and what you changed and what impact that had. So as you're devising your search strategy, this is useful, but also when you get to doing your final searches, you will need to keep a record of the number of results you're finding on each database and exactly what you searched for. So keep a table in a spreadsheet or a Word document listing your searches, so which database you searched, which date, what search string you put into that database and whether you applied any limits and the number of references you then retrieved on that database. It could also be useful to look for a way to download or save your search strategy on each database so you've got an accurate record of what you did. So in this video, we have covered the first 4 steps in doing a systematic review: creating a protocol, choosing where to search, developing your search strategy, and running and recording your search. Move on to the next video, which covers steps 5 and 6 in the process.